Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signor, and Brian Laundrie has been indicted. A warrant for his arrest is now out, and I have so many questions, so I'm so grateful that we have Christopher Melcher, attorney, here to help break down what's going on, why they did this the way they did it. He's not actually still charged with a murder. He's charged with seemingly, credit card fraud, Christopher? Can you help explain? I think by now most people understand what they've done, what the charge is, that there's an arrest warrant out for him, but I want to clarify, what are they actually charging him, Christopher, with?
So this is an indictment handed down by a grand jury. So it's a federal grand jury, which the prosecutor convened. It's to hear some evidence and then decide whether or not criminal charges would be brought. And so this indictment is the charge being brought by the grand jury, and they do not have anything to do with the homicide. It's dealing with Brian's unauthorized use of two, or maybe looks like three, credit cards or debit cards. And so that's all they're going on at the moment. And then they've issued an arrest warrant under that indictment for him.
So, all right. So why do you think they are going after this crime versus a murder? What is the reasoning, you think? You have some criminal law, obvious experience. What do you think the reasoning is behind this?
Oh, this is the way to go, because if all they want to do is get their hands on him at the moment. So they've found a way to issue this arrest warrant, which is going to go nationwide. And so any law enforcement that comes in contact with them can hold them pursuant to this warrant. Now, generally, you got to bring somebody to a magistrate or a judge within 48 hours to, basically show probable cause to continue holding them. Here, they already have the indictment, but there's going to be some kind of processing that would happen after they grab them. Okay, so say they get him in custody, then he's going to start exercising his rights, saying, "Hey, there's not enough probable cause to hold me." He may try and challenge the indictment, saying, "Hey, I should be let loose." And then if he started exercising those type of rights, the prosecution would come back and say, "Look, we already got an indictment for you. Here's the evidence that we have." They don't have to say anything about the homicide because they're not charging him with that under this document. So it allows the prosecution through this grand jury to get their hands on him, to hold him without having to disclose any evidence that they've obtained about the homicide, because they don't have all the evidence, I'm sure, at this point. It's going to take a while, and they certainly don't want to disclose what they do have. But if you're holding somebody in custody, then it starts off this whole process where you're going to have to disclose some stuff to his defense lawyer.
Interesting. So those out there that are frustrated that we're not getting information, as we've discussed previously together, it's a good thing that they're not really necessarily telling us things, because you want to hold on to those cards as you pursue this case to ensure you can interview him or get the things you need to do to actually nail him. Now, the other thing is the parents, right? Laundrie's parents, a lot of people are wondering, are they accomplices? Have they been hiding information? Does this in any way help them, ask them more questions or get them more involved?
Well, it could. Where I think that's probably where it's going, because the parents obviously have not been cooperative, and they may have even misled the police potentially about his whereabouts. We don't know for sure, but they look awful. And so what the prosecution could do is convene another grand jury proceeding relating to the homicide, and bring in the parents under that one for questioning. And so they could be compelled to appear before a grand jury and answer questions in that proceeding. They have a Fifth Amendment right, but it's only to the extent that your answer would tend to incriminate you. So they would have to provide some, explanation as to why they need to remain silent. So one thing that they could do is bring them in for questioning under this indictment for the access card violation and start asking them questions. They're compelled to answer questions. Yes, they could take the fifth, but the court would then determine, well, how would your answers to questions about your son's alleged use of these access cards possibly incriminate you?
Interesting. Yeah, exactly. Because the plead the fifth is only to protect yourself from saying you're guilty, right? That's really what it's for.
For statements that could tend to incriminate you.
Right.
So it's and the court's going to definitely give a lot of leeway around that, because you can't say like, hey, I'm guilty and therefore I don't want to talk. So there has to be some logical explanation as to why their testimony to a grand jury about their son's use of a couple credit cards or debit cards could possibly implicate them.
Or where he went, when did he come home? All those sort of questions that are relevant potentially to the murder investigation. Now they are sort of obligated to answer these questions because it's about credit cards versus about Gabby and the murder and them covering up a murder.
It's an incredible tactical move, and we'll see. It's be up to the court to determine whether their First Amendment privilege extends to this particular investigation. And we don't know all the facts. I mean, whose credit cards or debit cards they were, and the circumstances, timing that it was used. So definitely the parents are going to say, we ain't talking. And the prosecutor definitely would say, yeah, you need to talk, because there's nothing here that you could say in answers to my questions about, this credit card or debit card investigation that could possibly incriminate you. And the judge would have to determine that. And so that may be one way of putting some pretty extreme pressure on the parents to talk about issues that then would ultimately also lead over to the homicide investigation. Now, certainly they would be arguing as part of that Fifth Amendment to say, yes, we had nothing to do with this credit card thing, but they're under suspicion, I would imagine, as having maybe lied to the police about his whereabouts or maybe altered evidence. I mean, they did go pick up the Mustang.
Right. Oh, well, I was going to ask, because there's seemingly a lot of delaying, right? Stalling for time is what a lot of people feel like is happening. What's the timeline here in this? Like, how quickly do they have to force them to do this? I mean, they have to get an actual jury and a trial. Like, how realistically could this happen? How quickly?
Oh, well, the grand jury is like standing. So this is different than a normal, like criminal jury that we see, where you basically tell people to come in and interview them and all that. This is already a standing grand jury that's done for these purposes. So they could be doing this right now. It could happen.
There's no stall here. It could happen pretty quickly where they're like, yep, all right, good. Come on and question the grand jury.
Yeah, I got to think though that the Fifth Amendment privilege is gonna protect them on some questions, because like to me, I mean, they had no obligation to speak, so they're not in violation of any law about remaining silent. They have that right, just like the rest of us do. But they did go pick up his car, and so that could be altering evidence. I don't know what was in the car. Was there evidence there that they threw away? Did he ever actually go into that reserve? I mean, because it seems like the police are searching that gigantic swampland solely based on the parents' statement to them that that's where he went. But if that's not a truthful statement, then they can get in trouble for that. So if they're asked before a grand jury about their son's last whereabouts, or whether their son told them he was going or where he had been, that could be enough for them to have a Fifth Amendment privilege to say, look, those questions could implicate us in a potential crime for aiding and abetting or destruction of evidence or lying to law enforcement. So we're not going to answer that. And a judge might give them cover on it, or might say, no, I don't see the logical connection, and it doesn't intend to implicate you, and answer the question. So it could be overcome in some circumstances.
So do you think they're going to give us information sooner or later? Or do you think they're going to hold on to as long as they can, sort of the information here? What do you think the next steps are in this? Do you think this will encourage Brian to come forward, or do you think he's going to remain in hiding?
Yeah, I mean, if he's hiding, because we don't know what his circumstances
could
are
be dead
here.
Too. Yep.
It could be dead. But if he's hiding, I got to think he's all in on that. He's not going to just, say, hey, I've come to grips with this and I'm going to turn myself in. So I think.
Well, can I pitch you? Can I, not to give him any ideas, but there is a version of me where it's like, couldn't the parents and Brian just be like, hey, I went off the grid on a camping trip. I just got back. I don't know what's going on. Last time I saw Gabby, she got out of the van, and I brought the van back. I mean, couldn't he just tell us that and then shut up? And then no one has to say anything. Is there a version of that, or they could just have a story that's like, sorry, I went off the grid. I'm back here. Yeah, sorry, and try to play silence. And unless they can provide evidence that he was there, try and get away with this.
If he did that, I don't think he would say a word until, well, maybe never. But if he said anything, it would probably be during the trial, the homicide or murder trial. I don't think it be because he's been silent before. So if he did come back, I doubt that he would make any statements, because if he lies about one thing, then that destroys whatever's left of his credibility. So I got to think he's all in on this hiding, if that's what's going on. And I don't know why there would be any change of heart. I think he would just be out there until found. And
if they find him while hiding, does that give the case more weight? Like, is he in more trouble then, or can he is there a defense where he can claim, well, I didn't know?
Yeah, I mean, so there are this concept called consciousness of guilt. So when you're acting in a way that shows that you're guilty, like you're fleeing from the police, that could be argued that shows consciousness of guilt, because people definitely are reluctant to talk to the police. They don't want to get arrested. But when you actually run away, when there's this level of scrutiny here, that, at least to me, shows consciousness of guilt. There would have to be an explanation for it. So I think that they can bring that up. And the only way he could really explain that is then testifying to say, yeah, I didn't know that all these people were looking for me or wanted to talk to me, so I just wanted some free time. I don't think that really anyone's
not
going to
likely.
buy that.
Is there any version where you think he can, at this point, given what we have, if he's not dead and he's in hiding, if he's discovered, can he get away with this? I guess is what I think a lot of us are wondering.
Well, so we really need to know the details of the cause and manner of her death. We know it's a homicide. And so that means killing at the hand of another human. That's all that homicide means. There's a difference between murder. So like if you kill somebody in self-defense, it's a homicide. So all we know is that she was killed by another human.
Right.
That's all we're told.
Not a bear. Some of the people are wondering. Clearly a human on human crime.
That's what homicide means. And it doesn't go into the motivations, reasons, or cause, manner, any other cause or manner of it. So the details there would then, I mean, there could be evidence there just on her body that would implicate him pretty convincingly.
But then why wouldn't they have declared, again, you think they may already have that evidence and they just aren't using that yet, is the other logistical potential, right?
Yeah, so one is out of respect for the family, because although the outpouring of support has definitely helped lead to a lot of clues because of this attention, but also, hey, this is a horrific crime that happened and the family's hurting, and so you want to maintain their privacy. Also, if maybe there was a witness, maybe there was somebody else involved, maybe somebody knows something that hasn't come forward publicly, and so if the police are releasing details to all of us about the manner in which the death occurred, then we don't know if these later witnesses that come forward, maybe somebody says, yeah, I saw him striking her. How do we know that person didn't just look on the internet and see that evidence and is just parroting it back? But if they hold that back, it's like, hey, that was never public knowledge, those circumstances.
It's true. There's a lot of people who are just think they have cracked the case because they see image in a cloud or a bush and everyone's going crazy with it. It's true. Once it's as frustrated as we want the information, right? It is smart that they're holding on as long as they can. How long can they do that though, realistically, you think? Could this go for months where they don't actually reveal any of this? Is that common in cases like this?
Yeah. So, until they charge him with murder and get him into custody and start, a criminal proceeding, they don't have any obligation to release information. And it's when he's in custody and they're proceeding is when they'd have to start turning information over to the defense team. So we could see this going on for quite a bit. And we also saw the shift here once FBI took this thing over. They just clammed up. I mean, there's so many different agencies involved, and now no one's saying anything. Right. And it's clearly because FBI is involved and wants to control the flow of info.
Which makes sense. So what do you suspect this will just be quiet on the Western Front for a little while now as they ask these questions and try until we locate Brian, that we're not going to get much more information?
My suspicion is that we're going to see intense pressure placed on the parents, and hopefully with a grand jury proceeding, maybe through this indictment on the debit card thing, and try and crack them, because they deserve the pressure, and maybe something happens. Maybe a deal is made in exchange for information, because it's very strange that that the parents of Brian did not come forward earlier when they claimed that he went missing, and that they went and got his car and brought it home. That is very odd behavior. And I got to think that they've done something to assist him, or maybe altered evidence, and they could be under, they could be in a lot of trouble for that. So the enormous pressure that could be placed on them could get maybe a deal made. Maybe they plead guilty to aiding and abetting or obstruction of justice, or lying to law enforcement, whatever they can get here, and in exchange for information.
And one thing I do want to clear up, because we a lot of people are out there calling his mom, Brian's mom, a DA, district attorney. She's not. From everything I've gathered and done my homework, she may have worked for a DA's office as some sort of clerk or something at some point, but we were able to go through the government salaries, and she's not. There's no proof that she was. So we don't even know if she has access, but there's all these theories out there of people, well, she was a DA, she had access, she could have gotten these documents and put them on the run. I guess my final question to you is how likely do you think it is that these parents could have helped him do this and help him get money, that it's not tracked, or the phone, or even ID if he needs to travel? Do you think that's easy for someone to have done in this situation with the time they had?
Well, he had a lot of time, and there was that camping trip that he went with the parents on afterwards. So what was that about? And maybe they were getting provisions together and dropping him off, or, basically setting up some remote campsite with provisions. And then they come back and say, oh my God, he went into the swamp. And to me, it seems like a gigantic diversion, because, their story makes no sense, that he's gone missing. How did they find his car? Why did they not immediately call law enforcement and say, here's his car, he went missing? Because when he went missing, my first thought was somebody picked him up, that he didn't go and leave, that somebody grabbed him, because they're going to do street justice on him, was my first thought. And then my second thought is that he went and committed suicide. And then maybe the third is he's on the run. But if it's option 1 or 2, if I'm the parent, I want law enforcement out there to say, hey, my son may have either hurt himself or somebody may have hurt him. I'm not touching that car.
Right.
I want to know, what there's evidence there that could lead to the recovery of my son, or bring people to justice, or whatever it's going to be. I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, he's missing, when he's one of the most hated and wanted people around.
Right, to protect him, you'd want
just
almost
go
the
pick his
cops
car
to get
up and
him.
bring it home.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because if you're protecting your son, you'd do it. It's just like if you didn't murder a fiance, you would tell the cops the last whereabouts so they could find your fiance. So all of these are important questions. And so, yeah, I just meant more, can they get documents and stuff? I guess who knows. Final thought that came up in a stream, and I promised everyone I'd ask you, because I was confused. Some tried to help me. Laundrie's parents and Brian's lawyer. If the lawyer is told and knows that Brian did it, Brian's a murderer. The lawyer now, and as a criminal defense attorney, your client comes and says, "Yeah, I did it." Do you have any moral or legal obligation to disclose that, or no? You can ignore that and still continue to defend the client.
So a couple parts on that. On the legal side of it, we cannot speak. So as a criminal defense attorney or any kind of attorney, if a client comes to us in confidence and says whatever they're going to tell us, we cannot speak. There are some exceptions I can get into, but for the most part, we cannot speak. That's the attorney-client privilege. The client holds the privilege. So the client can say, "Hey, attorney, it's okay that you could talk." But absent waiver by the client, it's the duty, the solemn duty of the attorney. It's a sacred duty to say, we cannot speak. And the reason why that's there is so that people, even guilty people, can get legal advice. And if somebody who is guilty or maybe being charged incorrectly with a crime or suspected of a crime would go to a lawyer, and the lawyer would just say, "Well, I'm going to the police," and telling that, well, no one could get legal advice. So it's there for an important reason. Now, on the moral question of it, hey, it's a terrible thing to be in receipt of information that can help somebody else, but you are duty bound not to reveal it. And but that's just part of the job. I don't know on the moral evaluation of it, but it's just we can't. And if somebody has those type of issues, then they shouldn't be a criminal defense attorney. Another point, though, is that Brian's lawyer normally would not be the parent's lawyer. And there could even be a conflict of interest representing of all of them. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is that if the parents tell something to Brian's lawyer, that's not privileged. The attorney-client privilege only exists between the attorney and client. So
Gotcha.
Unless that lawyer was representing the parents and taught to them, that ain't privileged. And the parents and the lawyer can be compelled to answer that. The only way that it would be privileged if that lawyer said, "Hey, I'll represent Brian and mom and dad too," which normally criminal defense lawyers don't do, because that could be a conflict of interest. As we may see with them, maybe the parents turning on Brian and saying like, "Hey, we're not going to jail for you here, and we're going to make a deal and give evidence."
Interesting stuff there. Always glad to have Christopher here when we can. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you subscribe to Christopher's YouTube channel. You can find it. It's there on screen, but also on YouTube at CCMESQ on YouTube. Go show him a subscribe. And make sure to join us on Wednesday. We'll be here. He'll be live in Los Angeles at the Brittany trial. I'll be here calling in, taking in calls. We'll be here all day. So please, I'll put that at the end of this video. So go click on that, hit set reminder, and join us on Wednesday. We'll give you more breakdowns legally as they breaks down on this Brian Laundrie search. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for more here on Popcorn Planet.